All right, as a reminder, we do have an agenda or meeting notes attached to this meeting where we do have an attendees list, if you don't mind filling that out. And feel free to add anything to the agenda to be discussed here. Okay, without further ado, we could get started. Seems like we've got a couple items on the agenda. First, let's go through status updates. I'll kick it off, and then anybody else that wants to provide their status updates, that'd be great. Right now, I was essentially talking to and pairing with Travis on the release for 0.14.0. I'll get go into a little bit more detail there, but outside of that, let's see. There is one of the biggest changes that I very recently started pushing for or pushing to finish is the intercept command. And so if you are aware that this has been something that's been lingering for a couple months now, and I do want to get it over the finish line since there are a couple times that a feature such as this or something that helps during the build process, better debug and inspect, would be useful. Has come up multiple times. So trying to get that over the finish line, and overall just finalizing 0.14.0, which I'll talk about later. Any
Javier,
other?
is your shirt green by chance?
Oh, snaps. Yeah, but
I was gonna say,
see that
you're
cool
really
background
mid.
though? Like,
Yeah.
I should have a cooler shirt or cooler background that I should that. I'll fix that. Thank you for the call out.
That's funny. So
I'm
it just
it's a cool
targeted
man.
your shirt and
Yeah.
none of your actual background.
All right, what's your status update, Andrew? I'm just kidding.
I have kind of a fun one. I've been trying to hack away on the Windows contrib VM config, and I found a really fun way to make sure that your files are synced between the VM. So I'm going to try and incorporate just to keep the surprise a little bit longer. I was going to update the docs to describe it, but it's basically using SMB or Samba file sharing to mount it, which I'd never been able to do. And you can mount it over SSH port forwarding. But yeah, I'm going to update the docs with that.
And what are we keeping in sync? Sorry, I feel like I missed that part.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. If you're making changes to Pack, make it very easy for you to do it all on your Mac, all the code changes, and have them instantly runnable and available up in your dev VM. So yeah, without taking up too much time, the changes will be up in the dev docs pretty soon if anyone wants to try it out.
Dude, nice. Okay, any other status updates?
did a bit more work on my pack action for GitHub Actions. I have a open PR for use that in Pack, so we are kind of dogfooding it as we release our image to Docker.
No big updates on the Windows side of things other than I think lifecycle image support made it through in Pack, thanks to Micah. And I think you were pairing with Victoria.
Yeah, I think we had everyone on that one, so good work, everyone.
And then we're moving on to build package support, which we added to the agenda to discuss some kind of hindrances that we have with that.
Cool. Sounds good.
Just doing internal onboarding this week, so we're not doing a lot of feature development. So.
Cool. Good to know. All right. Moving on. Let's see, release planning. I guess I could speak to this more at length. Like I mentioned, right now we're working on 0.14.0. I've gone through here and there were a lot of issues that were still open, that were kind of slated or we had hoped to put into 0.14.0 that we've kicked off onto 0.15, just because they weren't going to make it in time. There are some issues here that are probably going to be worked on after feature complete, but all of those would be to do with the release process and not any like feature changes, right? Let's see. So anything on here on that milestone right now that is open is kind of anticipated to potentially make it in by end of day today. Talking to Travis right before this meeting, there are a couple things that he still wants to squeeze in by end of day, and he might require some assistance in getting those in. And they all have to do with registry, the Buildpacks registry, sorry. And so at minimum, I believe I'll be supporting him wherever I can there. Any questions, comments, concerns on what's currently on the milestone?
Under the milestone, there's still the wcow produces the unrunnable image. Are we content with bumping that to the next release?
So I thought it was my understanding that there is an RFC that will essentially make this moot and put it under a won't fix label. I looked at the acceptance of the RFC and it looks like it's pretty unanimous right now. So I was kind of just hoping to close it out as a won't fix. Do you have?
Oh, perfect.
Does that work? Okay, cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was making sure that there wasn't assumed to be more work to be done on this issue. Sounds like we're on the same page.
Maybe I should probably go read the RFC. But in general, is it because it can be fixed by the stack?
Yeah, that's right.
I see.
Yeah, the general approach is to make the Windows stacks behave the same way as the Linux stacks. Eventually, Lifecycle will validate that. Is really what the RFC is.
Okay.
And the proposed spec change are covering.
Okay.
All right, cool. Without further ado, if we're good there, we can move on to the next topic, which is Windows build packages.
Been talking a lot, so I can let Micah describe it if you want.
Sure. We have the PR or a draft PR open for Windows build packages. The current implementation creates packages that are a little different than Linux build packages in two ways. The first way is that the layer content of the build package is a Windows layer. It's prefixed with files, / then all the rooted stuff is under there. And for folks who don't know, like the difference between like if you Docker pulled any Windows image, every single layer inside of there is going to be a tar format, just like Linux, except the directory structure has It's a relative path with files prefix on front of it, literally capital FILES /. That's the first part of the difference between a Linux and a Windows build package, is that all the layers consist of that prefix. Second part, right now in the implementation, is that there is a base layer consisting of the standard Windows operating system layers underneath that. And those are a proprietary format, not documented. You can't make them from scratch. The only reason we have it there is to allow those build packages to be Docker pullable. So pretty much to get global feature parity with Linux build packages and Windows images, or in Windows build packages. If you want, that parity to be Docker pullable, works with Pack, basically those two things, you need to have that base image underneath there. Potentially, if we wanted to compromise on any of that feature parity with Windows, like if we didn't want these to be Docker pullable, we could potentially change that part of the implementation to potentially not have that base image underneath them. I don't think we're going to be able to get away from the first difference, that files prefix. I would suspect that I guess the way that, I think that one would be a little harder to tweak. So the problem with this now is it goes against the distribution spec, depending on how you interpret it, as all things in the spec. So I think there's potentially some questions about what we want the build packages for Windows to look like in an ideal state, and then how many features we want to compromise to get there, and how much extra work do we want to put in the pack to get there.
There is one solution that we talked about briefly that would solve both of those, except I think it would cause a lot of headaches for users, is that you could actually put like in a build package, the image is really just the transport mechanism, I guess, for the information. So you could actually use a Linux image and put a Windows focused build pack in there, and it would adhere to the spec. But I think the problem with that is like, it's kind of your Docker is either pointed towards like Windows images or Linux images. And if you're doing a Windows build, it's going to be very difficult to like switch it over to pull an image and then switch it back and even use that image anymore. I don't really know how that workflow would work. So if that one little piece would work, it would be a really nice solution to this. But
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, it sounds like from what I saw in one of the Slack channels, there's buying at least from Steven on using a base image, right? The Nano server, I believe, using that and keeping pretty much everything parity, I guess, up there with Linux. I have some issues with it, more long term, because I feel like us having the goal of being able to Docker pull these build packages has caused us to compromise on exactly what it is that we really want, right? Not just here on Windows, but I think I was talking to David about using different media types and using OCI artifacts, and that, isn't really supported by the Docker command or Docker daemon, right? There's like a different CLI for that, but you could still use the registry in that way. And so that's what's really frustrating, is like the registry has all these capabilities of doing exactly what we want, but the tooling isn't readily available or readily available to the user. So I think that's really where we're lacking there. So I think long term we might want to like say, oh, you know what, like maybe Docker CLI isn't the thing that we should be pinning all our implementation against. But in the short term, I definitely see that we're going to have to make that compromise to just kind of get up into that ecosystem.
I do think so. Here's one thing I think that could be a viable path forward is I'd like to RFC the spec to, I think it's going to be a Windows targeted image. We kind of know that, right? We can't have this mixture of like a Linux image when you're doing Windows builds. So we know we'd have to RFC the spec to just adjust the format for the layers, the layer blobs, because right now it's just a Linux layer format if you look at the distribution spec.
You mean like the files prefix?
Yeah, so want to add the note about the files prefix for Windows build packages. And then I think we should make the spec a little less specific, or I guess a little more specific. I think the spec right now kind of inadvertently says all layers must look like this, which kind of implies there's no OS layers. But I think we should adjust the wording of the spec to be specific, that like build pack layers look like this, and kind of make no mention of base layers. So, because really that's the part of the contract that matters, is the build pack layers, right? So it shouldn't actually matter to any platform whether there are there's information in any rootfs layers.
Okay, so are we saying that then the distribution spec is more targeted at like, or the definition of a build package theoretically is really more the layer itself, not the whole OCI image,
Yeah,
image.
because that would make it broad enough to accommodate both, Scratch-based Linux packages as well as packages with some arbitrary base in it. And later, that way, maybe eventually Microsoft releases a Scratch for Windows, and then we can put that in there. It's not going to be empty as the Linux one is, but it'd still be smaller. But at least then, it's like we don't have to keep updating the spec to follow this. We can focus the spec on the part that actually pertains to the contract, which is the build pack layers.
I like that a lot. I think that's a really good way to go forward.
And we did a quick look at the spec. It does look like it's just probably a few words could be removed to loosen that up. I feel like we don't necessarily have to go all in to not talk about an image format and just talk about a layer format. I think seems like the image format works pretty well so long as you relax the constraints around what's in every layer.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah, I think right now it says like all file system layers must look like this, and I think we could just change that wording to say like all build pack layers must look like this, and that implies anyone that's rooted at the CNB directory or the CNB build packs.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Does it feel like a good? So we had a couple potential avenues to go with this. We were potentially going to dig into Pack a little bit more, see if there's how gruesome it would be to try and support baseless images, just using ImageUtil to pull down or tweak ImageUtil, pull down these baseless images, pop on a dynamic base image just for the purpose of what Pack needs to do for a Pack build, or maybe it wouldn't even need that. Maybe we just use it.
I don't think it itself needs it, right? I think it's the Docker daemon that needs it.
Right.
And so, I don't like Pack itself only cares about those individual layers, if I remember the implementation correctly. So it's not even looking at the base layers.
Right.
So my concern. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Was it on that? I was just going to throw out there our other thing we had in flight potentially. Well, I'll just say the one other thing. The other potential approach we could do. Oh wait, no, I'm forgetting. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
We'll circle back to
see
you,
if I
Mike.
can help you recap. I'm sorry to interrupt you. There was, put it in a Linux image. There was create our own Scratch, minimal Scratch, which we don't want to do because it's like risky. There is nano server base, right? And then there's no actual base, but leave it unpullable and somehow address it in Pack, but it wouldn't get around folks trying to tinker with build packages through the Docker CLI themselves. they'd kind of be limited to only doing it through Pack, which I feel like is a little bit of a risk and like makes it difficult for people to, I don't know, you want to Docker dive it, or you want to, you want to dive it, or you want to, you know,
Inspect it, or
yeah,
yeah.
anything not using Pack, right? So it kind of limits it to not be usable by other tools in this ecosystem of containers and stuff. So.
Yeah, I would say some people are probably even looking at it as a mechanism for doing offline capabilities, right? Or air-gapped capabilities, where they'll like load it into their Docker daemon and then just use that as the build process.
Yeah.
How
Although
big is
they
that gonna
can use
make these
CNB files
images?
for that, can't they?
They can if they're
For
delivered
local.
in that way, right?
Yeah.
So however these packages are released.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that the nano server base seems like that, coupled with a spec that doesn't target the OS layer, so that later if we want to improve it, you know, it will still work. I think that's the fastest way to get this implemented, and not go against the spec. And it kind of only comes at the cost of having to download Nano Server once, which they may already have downloaded.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is probably the most common base image anyway, right?
I think a lot of stacks will have it, potentially, and all that. Go ahead, Micah.
There's one catch in that it changes every month. Nano server is a very moving target. Every patch Tuesday, it's every layer in it is reauthored. So I do worry a little bit about having potentially red flagged base images sitting in a customer environment or something. Like they might be a critical vulnerability that.
Yeah, the registry as well, right?
Exactly. Now the data itself wouldn't necessarily be sitting in the registry. It would be a foreign layer. But yeah, just that there'd be some layer SHA out there that was red flagged by a security scanner that would make a customer unhappy. Like the day two questions aren't fully thought out, I guess.
Yeah,
I see. That makes sense. Yeah,
But I
there's more
think-
surface area on the images.
Who produced the Nano server is produced by Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are you saying just point the finger at them? I'm just kidding.
That's kind of what we do with Canonical, right? Like we're like, oh yeah, they're all these CVEs, and we're like, oh, kind of, but like they're not really so impactful, and Canonical's not even fixing them, so we're not doing anything.
Does mean you could have a collection of like 10
Older
different nano
packages.
servers. Yeah, like if you've got like you're pulling all these different ones that were published at different months, like you could have 10 months of nano server basically every time you build your image, right?
Yeah.
So we're just in terms of time, I don't want to.
Yeah.
We have a little more work to do, I guess, before the PR is ready to review. But those are the thoughts, I think.
I mean, so far it sounds like we're circling around the easiest and most viable solution, which is using that nano server. And any kind of caveats, we could essentially move on to other possible options or solutions. But the changes to the spec seem like they would encompass all possible solutions, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, for the sake of time, we have 1 minute for the last action item or last agenda item, milestones, keeping them small. David, do you want to talk about this?
Sure, I will not keep people too long. Pretty much in like a team retro, we were discussing how the milestone kind of felt like a very shifting target. It was significantly longer 2 days ago, and as of today, it's just significantly smaller, and we're more easily able to reach it. So we talked about different methods of trying to make sure that we can keep it fluid while not making it overly ambitious, so that we can actually like convey our targets more correctly to the consumers. So some suggestions were like having a hard limit of like, okay, we can have 10 open stories in a milestone at a time, or 5, etc. We also talked about having some sort of estimation not as rigorous as, a pivotal practice was, but more just, as a small, medium, or large. Although obviously those are kind of shifting targets. No, I don't think we had any like concrete decisions, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference, right, and what I probably like to implement as soon as possible is probably the limit, just because it's really easily attainable and something that the maintainers could kind of keep track of, at least manually for now, and set a certain threshold of like 10 open issues, right, and have those. And if that works out fairly well, right, then we could add automation to have that more strict limitation be put in place that we don't have to, complain about, and then we could have a bot just say, sorry, can't add that milestone because there's more than 10 or something like that. And then if that doesn't seem to work, then yeah, we could try other efforts.
be cool. Interesting to have a bot do that. I don't want to hold people. I feel like we're already, a minute or two
Slap them
over.
down. Cool. All right. I think we're 1 minute over, but if there is more conversation around this, we could pick it up next week as well. All right. See
See
you.
everyone.
Good talk, y'all.